The hum of computers filled the small research room. Lights blinked on complex screens, casting a soft blue glow on Eunji Park's face. She didn't look up. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic keyboard, dancing with a rhythm that spoke louder than any voice could. Eunji was different, not just because she was brilliant, but because she couldn't speak. Not a single sound had ever escaped her lips. Some people might have seen this as a weakness. But for Eunji, silence was her greatest strength. The wall-sized screen in front of her displayed a massive web of interconnected symbols. They weren't letters from any known human language. These were alien communication patterns, complex, beautiful, and mostly misunderstood. While other researchers saw a puzzle, Eunji saw a conversation waiting to happen. Her workplace, the Xenolinguistics Research Center, was located on Horizon Prime, humanity's most advanced space station. Floating in the dark emptiness between Earth and the outer colonies, this station was more than just a research facility. It was a beacon of human curiosity, a place where the impossible became possible. Dr. Hyun-Woo Kim, her mentor, watched her from the doorway. He had discovered Eunji 5 years ago in a small research university, where she was already breaking down communication barriers that stumped entire teams of experts. Her condition, a rare neurological disorder that prevented speech, had never stopped her. If anything, it had made her more determined. "Another late night?" he asked, knowing she could read lips perfectly. Eunji turned, smiled, and nodded. Her hands moved quickly, signing her response. A small translation device on her desk converted her sign language into spoken words. The Orion communication patterns are more complex than we thought. I'm close to something big. Dr. Kim walked closer, looking at the screen. Most researchers would see a confusing mess of lines and shapes, but he trusted Eunji's instincts. She saw connections that others missed. Her brain worked differently, and in the world of xenolinguistics, different was good. Outside the research center's windows, stars stretched into infinity. Distant planets twinkled, each potentially hosting life forms with languages humans had yet to understand. Humanity had spread across multiple star systems, but communication remained their biggest challenge. Eunji's computer beeped. A new data set had arrived from the latest deep space probe. Where others saw random signals, she saw potential conversations. Her eyes lit up with excitement. She wasn't just a researcher. She was a translator of the universe's most complicated language, the language of connection. Her latest project focused on the Orion Collective, an alien civilization that had resisted all previous human communication attempts. Their language wasn't just spoken or written. It involved chemical signals, electromagnetic waves, and complex body movements that no human had ever fully understood. But Eunji was different. She didn't just want to translate. She wanted to understand. A small digital clock on her desk showed 2:37 a.m. Most researchers would have gone home hours ago. But Eunji was lost in her world of symbols, patterns, and endless possibilities. Dr. Kim watched her work, a proud smile on his face. He knew something important was coming, and Eunji would be the one to bring it. The space station continued its silent journey through the stars, carrying within it a young researcher who was about to change everything we knew about communication. The Great Hall of Horizon Prime was ready for something big. Massive screens lined the walls, reflecting the nervous energy of hundreds of diplomats and researchers. Today was not just another meeting. This was humanity's most important conversation with the Orion Collective. Ambassador Jae-sung Lee stood at the center of the hall, his crisp white uniform showing no sign of the tension he felt inside. Behind him, a team of the world's best translators and communication experts waited. Their job was simple but impossible. Make contact with an alien race that had rejected every previous attempt at communication. The Orion delegates entered the hall. They were nothing like humans expected. Not the tentacled monsters from old science fiction movies. Not humanoid creatures trying to look like people. They were something completely different. 3 beings moved into the room. Their bodies shifted and changed like living liquid metal. Bands of color rippled across their surface. Blue, green, silver. Each movement seemed to mean something. Each color change looked like a word, but no human had ever figured out what those colors and movements actually meant. Previous meetings had been disasters. Entire diplomatic teams had gone home frustrated and angry. Some encounters had come dangerously close to starting wars. The Orion Collective was impossible to understand. Their communication was so complex that human technology kept failing. "We have translation devices," Ambassador Lee said clearly, holding up a small silver machine. "We want to talk." The Orion delegates didn't respond. Or maybe they did. Their bodies flickered with colors. Their shapes twisted and changed. But was this a response? Was this a language? Nobody knew. In the observation room, Yunji watched everything. She wasn't part of the official team. Just a researcher. A researcher who couldn't speak, but her eyes never left the screen. Dr. Hyun-Woo Kim stood beside her. "What do you see?" he asked, knowing she would have insights nobody else had. Yunji's fingers moved quickly on her communication device. Words appeared on the screen. They're not just changing colors. They're telling a story. Every movement is connected. The diplomatic team was getting frustrated. The translation devices beeped and buzzed, producing nothing but static and random noise. Years of advanced technology, and they couldn't understand three alien beings standing right in front of them. One of the Orion delegates suddenly shifted. A wave of deep purple spread across its body. The human translators looked confused. Was this anger? Confusion? A greeting? Nobody knew. Ambassador Lee tried again. "We come in peace," he said, speaking slowly and clearly. More color changes, more shape shifts, more confusion. Yunji leaned closer to the screen. Something was happening. Something the others were missing. She could see patterns, not just random colors and movements. There was a language here. A complex, beautiful language that no human had ever truly understood. The meeting was about to fail. Another diplomatic disaster was coming. The Orion delegates were preparing to leave. Months of preparation, millions of dollars, hopes of peaceful contact, all about to disappear. But Yunji was watching, and she saw something nobody else did. A story was being told, right in front of everyone. And only she seemed to understand that these weren't just random movements. This was communication, complex, beautiful, waiting to be understood. Something was about to change, and Yunji knew she would be the one to make it happen. The room was quiet, too quiet. After the failed diplomatic meeting, everyone looked tired, defeated. The Orion delegates had left without a single clear word exchanged. Another missed chance for understanding. Yunji sat in the research center, surrounded by screens filled with recorded footage from the meeting. While others saw failure, she saw a puzzle waiting to be solved. Her fingers moved quickly, sorting through hours of video, pausing, rewinding, zooming in. Dr. Kim watched her work. He had seen many researchers give up. But not Yunji. She was different. "What are you looking for?" he asked. Her hand signed quickly. The translation device spoke for her. Patterns. There are always patterns. The problem wasn't new. Humans had been trying to talk to the Orion Collective for years. Each attempt ended the same way. Confusion, frustration, silence. The Orion communication system was nothing like human language. It wasn't just about sounds or words. Their language was a complex mix of color changes, body movements, chemical signals, and electromagnetic waves. Imagine trying to have a conversation using only the changes in your skin color, the way you move, and invisible signals that most people can't even detect. Previous research teams had tried everything. Super smart computers, advanced translation machines, teams of the best language experts from around the world. Nothing worked. Some scientists thought the Orion Collective might be doing this on purpose, blocking communication, keeping humans at a distance. Others believed the aliens were so different that understanding seemed impossible. Yunji didn't believe either of these ideas. She believed something simpler, something more important. Communication was about understanding, not just words, but feelings, context, the space between words. On her screens, she watched the Orion delegates again and again. Most people would have been bored. Not Yunji. Each replay showed her something new. A slight color change, a tiny body movement, a wave of energy too small for most machines to catch. She remembered something from her research. How humans with hearing problems communicate, how they read body language, how they understand things beyond simple sound. Her condition, not being able to speak, had taught her something important. Communication is more than just talking. It's about connecting. The research center was quiet. Most researchers had gone home, but Yunji kept working. Her computer screens filled with data, color charts, movement tracking, signal analysis. Dr. Kim brought her a cup of tea. He knew she would work all night. Take a break, he suggested. Yunji just smiled and shook her head. Her eyes never left the screens. Something was happening in those recordings, something important, a language waiting to be understood. The Orion delegates had left without a word, but Yunji knew they had said everything. She just needed to learn how to listen. Outside the research center's windows, stars moved slowly. Planets turned. Entire civilizations continued their silent dance across the universe. And in this small room, a young researcher was about to change everything humans knew about talking to someone completely different. One pattern at a time. 3 weeks after the failed diplomatic meeting, Yunji's research center looked different. Tables were covered with strange machines. Holographic displays flickered with complex patterns. Something was happening. Dr. Kim watched as Yunji moved between workstations. She wasn't just researching anymore. She was building something. Something nobody had ever seen before. "What are you working on?" he asked. Her hands moved quickly. The translation device spoke. A new way of listening. Most people would have thought she was crazy. But Dr. Kim had learned to trust Yunji's unusual methods. She saw connections that others missed. Her breakthrough started with an old memory. Years ago, when she was a child, doctors told her parents she would never communicate normally. But Yunji learned differently. She learned to communicate through movement, through touch, through colors and patterns that other people didn't notice. Now she was doing the same thing with the Orion Collective. The machine she built looked like nothing else. Part computer, part art project, part something completely new. Sensors that could detect the tiniest changes in color, movement, and energy. Translators that didn't just convert words, but try to understand context. She had studied every single recording of the Orion delegates, not just their movements during the diplomatic meeting, but every piece of data humans had ever collected about them. Most researchers looked at information. Yunji listened to it. Her first prototype was simple. A small device that could detect color changes faster than any human eye. Then she added more sensors. Machines that could track the tiniest body movements. Computers that could analyze electromagnetic signals too small for normal detection. Day and night, she worked. Most researchers would have given up. But giving up was not in Yunji's vocabulary. Dr. Kim brought her food. She barely noticed. Her eyes were always on the screens. Always watching, always listening. One night, something happened. The device she was building suddenly lit up. Colors danced across its surface. Complex patterns appeared that no human had ever seen before. "I think I'm understanding something," she signed to Dr. Kim. The Orion Collective's communication wasn't just about colors or movements. It was a complete system. Every color change meant something. Every tiny movement told a story. The electromagnetic signals added layers of meaning that humans had completely missed. It was like discovering a new language. No, more than a language, a complete way of thinking. Yunji wasn't just creating a translation device. She was building a bridge between two completely different ways of understanding the world. Her device could do something amazing. It could not just translate words. It could translate feelings, context, the space between words that most translation tools missed. Dr. Kim looked at the screens. Complex patterns moved. Colors shifted. Signals danced. "What does it mean?" he asked. Yun-ji smiled. Her hands moved. Everything. Outside, stars continued their silent journey. Planets turned. Civilizations waited. And in this small research center, something incredible was about to happen. The diplomatic hall was packed. Important people from Earth and space colonies filled every seat. Most of them looked nervous. Some looked angry. All of them knew this was humanity's last chance to talk to the Orion Collective. Another meeting was about to begin. Yun-ji wasn't supposed to be here. She was just a researcher, just a young woman who couldn't speak. But something was different today. She carried a small device, something she had built herself, something that looked like a mix between a computer and a piece of art. Ambassador Jae-sung Lee saw her enter the room. He looked confused. "She's not part of the official team," he whispered to Dr. Kim. Dr. Kim just smiled. "Trust me," he said. "She knows something we don't." The Orion delegates entered. They moved like living liquid, colors shifting across their bodies. Bands of blue, green, and silver rippled and changed. To most humans, it looked like nothing. Random movements, meaningless color changes. But not to Yun-ji. She stood at the edge of the room. No one expected her to do anything. She couldn't even speak. What could she possibly do? Her device came to life. Soft lights began to pulse. Complex patterns appeared on its surface. It wasn't just a machine. It was something more. The translation team prepared their usual equipment. Super smart computers. Advanced language machines. They had failed many times before. But they kept trying. Yun-ji was different. She began to move her hands. Not sign language. Something else. Her whole body started to communicate. Her device translated her movements into colors, sounds, and signals. The Orion delegates stopped moving. They turned. All three of them. Focused entirely on Yun-ji. Nobody in the room understood what was happening. The diplomats held their breath. The researchers leaned forward. Even the security team looked confused. Yun-ji's device created a bridge, not just with words, but with something deeper. She was showing the Orion Collective how humans really communicate, not just with sounds, but with feelings, with movements, with the space between words. Her body told a story. Her device translated that story into a language the Orion Collective could understand. Colors began to match on both sides. The Orion delegates' liquid bodies started to mirror the patterns from Yun-ji's device. Something was happening that no human had ever seen before. Communication. Real communication. Ambassador Lee couldn't believe his eyes. Dr. Kim washed with hope. The entire room held its collective breath. Yun-ji had no voice, but she was saying more than anyone had ever said before. Her device continued to pulse. Colors danced. Signals moved. The space between the Orion delegates and the humans began to shrink. Something impossible was becoming possible. A girl who couldn't speak was about to change everything humans knew about talking to someone completely different. And she was just getting started. The room was silent. Then it exploded with noise. Scientists, diplomats, researchers. Everyone was talking at once. What just happened? How did it happen? And who was this young woman who seemed to do the impossible? Yun-ji stood quietly. Her device continued to pulse with soft, complex colors. The Orion delegates remained still, their liquid-like bodies reflecting patterns that no human had ever seen before. Dr. Kim was the first to approach her. "Explain," he said simply. Her hands moved quickly. The translation device spoke. "We were listening wrong. Completely wrong." The room slowly quieted down. Ambassador Jae-sung Lee stepped forward. He looked both angry and amazed. "What do you mean?" he asked. Yunji's device began to show a complex presentation. Images and colors danced across its surface. It wasn't just a translation tool. It was revealing something much bigger. The presentation showed how humans had been trying to communicate all wrong. They treated the Orion Collective's communication like a simple language, but it was so much more. It was a complete way of understanding the world. Every color change meant something. Every tiny movement told a story. The electromagnetic signals added layers of meaning that humans had completely missed. The device showed different attempts at communication. Each one highlighted in red failed attempts, missed connections, misunderstandings that had been building for years. Then it showed Yunji's method, highlighted in bright, vibrant green. Communication isn't just about words. Her device translated. It's about understanding, feeling, connecting. The Orion delegates began to move again. Their bodies shifted, colors changed. But this time, everyone could see something different. It wasn't random anymore. It was a conversation. One of the lead scientists stood up. "This changes everything," he said. And he was right. Yunji had discovered something huge. The Orion Collective wasn't trying to be difficult. They weren't trying to block communication. Humans just didn't know how to listen. Her device showed layers of communication, chemical signals that humans couldn't detect, electromagnetic waves that were too complex for normal machines, color changes that meant entire paragraphs of information. It was like discovering a new sense, a new way of understanding. The diplomatic team watched in shock. Years of failed meetings, months of tension, endless frustration. And now, everything was different. Ambassador Li looked at Yunji. "How did you do this?" he asked. Her hands moved. The device translated. "I learned to listen when nobody thought I could speak." The Orion delegates moved closer. Their colors synchronized with Yunji's device. Something was happening that no human had ever seen before. Real communication. Real understanding. Outside the room, the space station continued its journey. Stars moved. Planets turned. But something had changed. Humanity had just learned how to truly listen. And it all started with a girl who couldn't speak. News traveled fast in space. Faster than light. Faster than thought. Within days, Yunji's breakthrough became the most important discovery in human history. Her communication method wasn't just a tool. It was a revolution. Research centers across human-controlled space began to study her work. Universities created entire departments dedicated to understanding her approach. The device she created became something more than technology. It was a bridge between worlds. Diplomatic missions that had been stuck for years suddenly found new hope. The Orion Collective, once seen as impossible to understand, now became potential partners. Trade agreements that seemed like dreams began to take shape. But it wasn't easy. Many old-school researchers didn't like what Yunji had done. They had spent years trying to communicate the traditional way. Now a young researcher, who couldn't even speak, had solved what they couldn't. Dr. Kim helped her fight their criticism. "Your method is about listening," he would tell her. "Real listening, not just hearing words." The galactic communication centers began to rebuild everything. New training programs emerged. Scientists learned to look beyond words. They learned to understand the spaces between communication. They learned to truly listen. Yunji became more than a researcher. She became a symbol of hope, a symbol of understanding, a symbol that showed how being different could be a strength. Her device was modified, improved, shared with research teams across human space. Each version got better. Each version opened up new ways of understanding. The Orion Collective began to share more, slowly at first, then with growing excitement. Humans were finally listening, really listening. Cultural exchanges started, not just diplomatic meetings, real exchanges. Scientists from different worlds began to share knowledge in ways never possible before. Some discoveries were small, some were huge. The Orion Collective shared medical knowledge that could save millions of human lives. Humans shared technological insights that helped the Orion improve their space travel. But the biggest change was something you couldn't measure. Understanding. Real understanding. Eun-ji watched from her research center. She wasn't looking for fame. She wasn't looking for praise. She was just happy that people were finally learning to listen. Her device continued to evolve. It wasn't just about the Orion Collective anymore. Other alien civilizations began to use her communication method. Races that had been silent for centuries suddenly found a way to speak. Space became a little less lonely. Dr. Kim would sometimes find her working late at night, always watching, always listening, always trying to understand more. "You changed everything," he would tell her. She would just smile. Her hands would move. The device would translate. "We're just getting started." The space station continued its journey. Stars moved. Planets turned. Civilizations that once seemed completely separate now found ways to connect. And it all started with a girl who couldn't speak, who learned that the most important communication happens in the silence between words. The award ceremony was different from any other in human history. Normally, such events were loud. People clapping, speeches being made, lots of noise. But this ceremony was something special, because the person being honored couldn't speak a single word. Eun-ji Park stood on the stage of the Global Space Research Center. Thousands of people watched. Scientists from Earth, researchers from space colonies, even delegates from the Orion Collective. Ambassador Jae-sung Lee stepped forward. He carried a special medal. Not just any medal. The highest honor humanity could give to a researcher. "Eun-ji Park," he said, "you have done something nobody thought was possible." Her translation device spoke for her as her hands moved. "I just learned to listen." The audience was quiet. Then they began to clap. Not just clapping. Something deeper, a kind of respect that went beyond words. Dr. Kim watched from the side of the stage. He remembered the young girl he had first discovered years ago. A researcher nobody believed in. A scientist who couldn't speak. And now she had changed everything. The medal represented more than just her work with the Orion Collective. It represented something bigger. A new way of understanding. A new way of communicating. Eun-ji looked out at the audience. Most people would have been nervous, but she was calm. She had faced harder challenges than this. Her journey hadn't been easy. As a child, doctors told her parents she would never communicate normally. Other kids had made fun of her. Researchers had ignored her early research. But she kept going. Now she was being honored by the entire human civilization. The Orion delegates moved in their unique way. Colors shifted across their liquid-like bodies. But now, everyone understood what those colors meant. Everyone could see the respect, the admiration. "Your work," Ambassador Lee continued, "has opened doors we never knew existed. You showed us that communication is more than words. It's about understanding." Eun-ji's device translated her response. "Everyone can communicate. Some just do it differently." Scientists in the audience began to cry. Not sad tears. Happy tears. Tears of understanding. Her research had done more than just help humans talk to the Orion Collective. It had changed how people thought about communication, about differences, about understanding. Kids with communication challenges around the world now had a hero. Someone who showed that being different wasn't a weakness. It was a strength. Dr. Kim stepped forward. He had been her mentor, her support, her biggest believer. "She taught us," he said, "that listening is more important than speaking." The Orion delegates moved closer. Their colors synchronized, a sign of deep respect, something that would have been impossible before Eun-ji's breakthrough. As she accepted the medal, Eun-ji looked out at the world, a world she had changed, a universe she had helped connect. She couldn't speak, but she had made the loudest statement in human history. Understanding has no language. Communication has no limits. 5 years had passed since Eun-ji's breakthrough. The research center looked different now. Bigger, more advanced. Windows that looked out into deep space showed how much had changed. Alien ships moved between human colonies. Communication lines that once seemed impossible now hummed with activity. Yunji's original communication device sat in a special display case, not as a museum piece, but as a reminder, a symbol of what was possible. She was working on something new, always working, always listening. Her latest project was even more ambitious, not just communicating with one alien race, but developing a universal communication system that could work across multiple species. Dr. Kim watched her work. He was older now, but still proud, still amazed by the young researcher who had changed everything. "What are you working on?" he asked. Her hands moved quickly. The translation device spoke, listening to the universe. The research center was full of young scientists now, people from different planets, different species, all learning the communication method Unji had discovered. It wasn't just about talking anymore. It was about understanding. The Orion Collective had become close partners with human civilization. Trade routes opened. Scientific exchanges happened every day. Cultural understanding grew deeper with each passing month. But Yunji wasn't satisfied. She knew there was more to learn, more to understand. Her new device was different, more complex. It could detect communication signals that went beyond anything humans had imagined. Chemical signals, electromagnetic waves, color patterns, movement patterns, sounds that weren't really sounds. Young researchers from across the galaxy watched her work. She had become more than a scientist. She was a legend. Communication is an art, she would tell her students, not a science. An art of listening, an art of understanding. The space station continued its journey. Stars moved, planets turned, but something was different now. Civilizations that once seemed completely separate now found ways to connect, to understand each other, to listen. Outside her research window, a mixed crew worked. Humans, Orion Collective members, other alien species that had once seemed impossible to understand. They worked together, communicated together, understood each other. Dr. Kim brought her a cup of tea, a simple human gesture that meant so much. "You changed everything," he said. Yunji just smiled. Her hands moved. "We're just getting started." Her latest device began to pulse. Soft colors moved. Complex patterns appeared. Something new was coming. Another breakthrough. Another way of understanding. The girl who couldn't speak had become the universe's greatest listener. And she wasn't done yet. Space became a little less lonely, a little more connected, a little more understood. All because someone learned to listen in a way nobody had ever listened before. Understanding has no limits. Communication knows no boundaries. And the most important conversations happen in the silence between words.